Welcome to our panel, Deep Dive Innovation Food. First, we'll be talking about world hunger, food waste and food loss. But mostly we want to discuss possible solutions and innovations to those very complex issues. Two people who want to contribute to finding solutions for world hunger and food waste are Karin von Funck, Managing Director and Senior Partner of the Boston Consulting Group, and Bernhard Kowatsch, Head of Innovation Accelerator of the World Food Programme. After the panel, you will have the possibility to ask your questions, also online in our chat room, for those who are watching the live stream. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So, let's talk about world hunger. Hunger is still a global issue, but how big is the problem exactly, and why?
Hunger is one of those deceptive problems. Like, for a lot of us, thankfully, it's no longer an issue. And if you think about it on a global scale, in 1990, over 1 billion people were suffering from hunger. So this is really has been a global problem, but it also is solvable. So we actually have made progress over the last 20 years, 30 years, whereas now we have reached 690 million people. However, as good as that sounds, the last 5 years we've actually increased the number of hungry people again, mostly related to conflict, but also climate change, and most recently then even COVID-19 on top. So, and this is where it's really drastic and where we all need to do more, because like we need to reverse that trend that actually right now looks like by 2030, when we thought we can eradicate hunger by 2030, we may actually reach 840 million people that are hungry. So like we need to do more. We need innovations, we need startups and businesses to do more so that we can reach a world without hunger.
So, talking about businesses, first let's take the question. When we are talking about hunger, we need to be talking about food waste, because they are closely connected. But Karin, what is the global extent of food waste and food loss?
Yeah. It's absolutely right. I think if we talk about hunger and if we look at the same time of how much food is really being wasted, we could solve a lot of the problem. We could feed the world if we weren't to waste any. And today we're wasting 1/3 of our entire food. And for me, there's always the picture that if you take Manhattan Island and everything that's built on it, you multiply it 10 times up, that's the amount of food we're wasting globally. That's over 1.6 billion tons of food, or it's over 2 trillion worth of food, which is really a lot. And I think the point is similar than Bernhard has raised before. If you look at the trend and the dynamics in the developed world, we're doing pretty good to stabilize, at least, versus the developing world is seeing an increase in the food waste. It's very, very easily explained. It's a question of the household income people have, and thankfully that is growing in the developing world. That allows people to have more food, buy more food, look at different quality of food, but also buy different type of more fresh food, which have a higher waste ratio. So if you combine that, the food waste share, unfortunately, is still growing.
So, we talked about the developing world, but what can we do economically to tackle this issue of global food waste? What can industries do?
Yeah, so if you look across the food waste, I think you can go the entire value chain where you need to help solve it. There's not one in particular point where say if you do that, we've solved the problem. So it goes from the farmer down over the entire supply chain back to the consumer on that side. And if you take a few elements like take the supply chain infrastructure, when you have food, it needs to be transported, and securing having a really good cooling chain along from the beginning to the end to the consumer is one of the core issues. If we were to have consistent, really good cooling chains, that takes out 80 to 100 billion already of the issue. Or if we're using digital technologies along the way of the entire supply chain again, well, we can better make sure we have the product where we really need it, in the point of time where we really need it. Or if we use digital tools to do more dynamic pricing when it comes to shelf lives and products that are about to go off, that's the next 100 billion of food you could really save by doing those type of things.
So we want to talk about solutions here. So what is happening in the developing countries, or what should be happening to combat this problem?
Well, so it is interesting when you think about food waste. A lot of it in developed countries might be happening in your kitchens. So this might be something that you're buying food and you're throwing it away because it just expires because you purchase too much food, or like you order something from a restaurant and it gets thrown away. In developing countries, the issue is more on from the farm to actually when it enters the cycle of distribution and getting to people. So a lot of it is happening on farm level. So imagine this: when you're a farmer and you have an income of, let's say, $100. Somebody goes to you and takes away $50. This is what happens right now. So food waste, which is called post-harvest loss in this case, 40 to 50% of the food of smallholder farmers is being lost. Now, what can we do? And actually, there's lots of simple solutions. One of the innovations that we've supported is World Food Program. Is like an airtight silo, and this is something that smallholder farmers, they can keep the crops and store that for up to a year, and like essentially the post-harvest loss goes down from 50% to 2%, and we know that the farmers can actually double or triple their household income. Now imagine this, it's like one thing that people have to change is just drying the crop, putting it in such a silo or in an airtight bag, and you can eradicate food waste, you can eradicate post-harvest loss, and people double or triple their household incomes. So when people are asking like, is it possible to end hunger? Can we do something? There are those examples. We can actually show that post-harvest losses, food waste is one of those areas where, like, clearly we should do a lot more to tackle this, because it not only is it waste, because like all the food that's being produced that goes to waste, like, well, all the energy is getting lost. At the same time, we have hungry people, and then we can also lift people out of hunger sustainably, because all of a sudden people have sustainable solutions and something to eat. But that's not the end of it. Like, there's also other solutions, like be it growing plants without soil, hydroponics, new delivery systems for connecting like consumers to markets. Like, there's lots of other things we can talk about.
So, what are there any innovative ideas, any innovative projects, and especially you want to talk about something? You can say that there are innovations that can scale, something that we can use. What else can we do?
Yeah, what is really exciting, and this is the example that I just alluded to quickly, is there's this idea of post-harvest losses. Now, what you see if you can see the picture, is like there's these small silos. It's like 500 to 700 liters, and these silos are it's a market-based solution. So like it's the equivalent of like having a fridge in Western Europe. Mm-hmm. It's something that farmers have an opportunity to store, right? The food that they have they've purchased, and we have been like. Just in 2019, we've trained about 119,000 farmers in about 10 countries. But in the last 5 years, it's over 700,000 farmers that already have purchased these solutions. And this is something for, like, if anybody is watching this or interested in building a business, the farmers double or triple their household income. They are cash positive after the first harvest. Talking about some of these solutions where we say like, wow, we need to do more. We need the business to chime in. Mm-hmm. Perfect example of it's a business opportunity, and it actually is the farmers buy these silos and they are better off.
Talking about businesses, what are companies already doing to help tackle food waste and food loss? Are there any best practices we can learn from?
Mm-hmm. So I think if you look across, there's a lot of things that's happening, and there's also a lot of great examples, and it comes from both some individual companies, established companies, small startups, but also collaboration between different parties along the chain. If you take back to the farmer example, I think there's also companies like Life International who are really about there to train up people, as you said, on either how you store better or also how you, through the harvesting, optimize the entire agricultural process to really make sure that you have the limited loss on that side. I think that is one example. You have other companies like Maersk, which, back to my cooling chain point before, they ship a lot of the stuff in the containers, and today you sometimes don't know if a cooling chain was broken. If it was broken, then the entire container needs to be put away for risk. Now, they have put sensors now in many of their kind of like containers to a level that you can exactly say, has it still been, like, has the cooling chain been fulfilled, and did we keep the minimum temperature? Or if it was to be broken, which part of the shipping really is only effective, and you can take out a very small portion. I think those are some examples. There's in Bremerhaven, there's a startup, for example, who works on packaging solutions for fish. And if you look back at the different products, fresh fish, fresh veggies, fruits, that is where you have most of the waste, of course. And they've developed a packaging with that you can use for the supermarkets, where the shelf life is going up for 2 or 3 days of fresh fish, shelf life to now 10 days. And those are all examples that really are there. There's others. If you take the retailers, there's in France, for example, Intermarché, they do like the inglorious fruits. So it's anything that we don't see everything is looking so nice, like the apple that has little crabs, or the banana that is not the perfect shape, or the blueberries that are not the 1 centimeter minimum size, like all those type of things. And they have special campaigns where they sell the inglorious fruits and veggies to consumer at a bit lower price point, but kind of like recycle them. If you look again, where a lot of waste is also happening is, of course, restaurants, canteens, and you can take IKEA and Sodexo. They've developed for themselves a tracking technology where they kind of like can show their employees where, when they give out food, when they prepare the food, where all the food waste is happening. And that, for example, took it down over 25% in their restaurants, what their own employees are kind of like producing. And of course, there's all the startups centered around doing something with wasted food, like, or food that would waste, like the restaurants. The startup in Berlin, there's Dörrwerk, for example, who take all the apple waste and make the fruit snacks out of it. So there's a lot of, I think, innovative concepts out there. I think it would just need to do more of it, more systematically of it, and also scale it up to the point of addressing the broader challenge on that side.
Thank you. Thank you, Karin. Thank you, Bernhard, for giving us the insight. But now we want to open the panel to you. So if you have any further questions here in the room or the people online joining us, feel free to send us your questions or just raise your arm. I can't see you that well, but I will try to find you and ask your question. So just from the start, just let me take the tablet to follow the chat room. So just for the start, is there any burning question we have right now in this moment for our two panelists? So just raise your arm. Can't see. So nobody yet, so then let me just ask another question. In the beginning, we were talking about that right now the COVID pandemic is changing everything and is making a lot of things kind of harder. In my experience, the COVID pandemic leads that innovation is kind of stifled because companies are saying, okay, we put that on hold. We put the sustainability, we put the innovations on hold. Is it true, or is it right now? How will companies react, and how will that lead to battle things like world hunger and food waste or food loss?
So I don't think that the overall trend we've seen in consumers' behavior asking for more sustainable solutions on the food side will be stopped by COVID. I think any research we've done is that is a continued trend, and even got accelerated to the degree of more regional products and the appreciation of also fresh products more. On the innovation side, on companies, I think honestly it goes back. You do see some companies who are absolutely using the current crisis to come up with much more innovative solutions, and some clients that I've been working with have, through the pandemic, experienced that their innovation can be much faster. It's companies who suddenly reacted very quickly to the innovative needs of the current crisis and came up with much more innovative solutions. So I think there's a set of companies who will be the counter-investment ones, who will keep pushing very aggressively. There's, of course, others that are more hardly hit, that will need to shift their resources to drive through their entire business. But I don't think the COVID itself is slowing down. I rather see it accelerating in some of the dimensions on that side.
Yeah,
I don't know how you see it.
If I can add to this, and I mean, it's obviously like I'm heading an innovation team, so like we have a tradition now of 5 years of actually working with innovation startups and also companies to actually find new solutions to end hunger. Like our work has been a lot more busy, also because of COVID-19 in the last couple of months. And part of this is because we need innovation even more right now, because like we need to be quicker, we need to be better, we need to actually test with people and make sure that we can, in our case, like in emergencies, reach vulnerable people, but sustainably also like what are things that we can do to create livelihoods for people so that they are still, they can provide for themselves. And it's like the need is actually even more urgent right now than before. And what's interesting, there's like one really exciting example that I want to highlight is like, so we have one of the teams of our Somalia operation. They have come up with a concept that's called eShop. It's really something like Uber Eats or Delivery Hero for vulnerable people in Somalia. So like essentially also what they've done is they've created Delivery Hero in Somalia, and they already had sales of $1.4 million in July this year after starting in March. And so this is what you see, like all of a sudden there's people, they can socially distance, they can order food online or through a text code on the feature phone. And so these innovations help people stay safe, but at the same time, I mean, we're creating a new market for the private sector.
I think one addition to the last point you just mentioned, if you look at the channel shift we've seen with people ordering more online, sometimes also the selection, your preferred selection wasn't available. So what we've seen in the research we've recently been doing is that the willingness of consumers to test new things has significantly increased, which I think is for many of the more innovative, newer solutions also a very cool moment, because not only I'm ordering much more in, I'm sometimes exposed to new brands, and the willingness in the crisis has just massively gone up. So at least the trial behavior of people is also a chance for everyone who's currently out there having more innovative things in the market right now.
Interesting. So, is there a question right now in the audience? Something you want to ask the panel?
The face masks make people shy.
Yeah.
There's a question there. There's a question there.
Is there yeah, you there.
So I represent Kempinski Hotels chain from sustainability perspective. So my question is, okay, we have of course in the restaurants a lot of food that is coming to out of date, but how could we put together this? So if we would like to help this the World Food Program, and if you are responsible for the innovation, how could we channel it? Because sometimes if we try with the food banks, you know, they need a specific assortment of food, specific requirements which we cannot fit. But okay, in some hotels we use Too Good To Go app to channel the ready food, but we have in the pantry, if we have, I don't know, pasta that is coming close to date and we need to respect strictly the requirements of out of date, how could we channel this towards reaching, you know, through your fleet in the World Food Program to the areas in need?
No, it's a very good question. Thank you for like also the thoughts in what you're already doing. Like I think what's challenging in a lot of those cases is you really need to talk about like the specifics, like where do you actually have, is it a surplus, is it something, and how could you actually get access to this, or could you also like bring in, for instance, like your clients into the into the equation of solving it, like where like with food that's already there and stored somewhere, one of the issues that is there globally is that a lot of times the food where you have it and where the surplus is, it's not where you need it and where like the shortage is. So this is something, and so you would need to talk about like, okay, where would you have those surplus, and then also what would the process look like. There are like, so Too Good To Go, a couple of like initiatives that I can only recommend. Like it's good, and really I applaud you for doing that. It's all those initiatives, it's really hard to make this sustainable because it's, to a certain extent, as you're describing, like you can't really plan for surplus that you may have occurring. So it might be a combination of either surplus that's occurring, but also with other aspects of like maybe more plannable, and that's maybe that's then other financial contributions or skills contributions or marketing contributions. I mean, a collaboration that we actually just launched with Delivery Hero to that matter is that consumers in the checkout can, when they buy or purchase food, they can also say they can share their meal, and so can add to the checkout something on their phone that they then also contribute towards the World Food Program. Now, this is obviously a completely different question than just the food surplus, but it's this is where I think you need to talk about solutions that bring in both your surplus, but then maybe also what makes sense from a business model for you.
I think there's one other point also adding to what you've said is quite often in the developed world, food surplus happens in not a big enough amount to do something with itself if you're just a single player. I recall there's a very good startup that's funded by the Norsken Foundation in Sweden, where in Sweden it's very common that you go for lunch, and then there's the lunch menus, and there's 3 menus you pick, and every restaurant has like 3, 5, 7, 8 portions of a certain dish over every single day. So there's the startup that in Stockholm bundled all the restaurants, and the restaurants can hop on a platform where I as a consumer can go on and kind of look, okay, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which restaurant on my way back home has still left over some lunches, and I can get it at 40% of the price or 50% of the normal price. Then it's totally fine from a also economic perspective for the consumer to pick up the food there and you just grab it on the way. The restaurant itself, like every single one, couldn't solve it, but the cumulative and the platform that was built behind allows you to then kind of like work also with the fluctuations you meant and like the small amount of was. So I think there's probably also more the need to collaborate and for more of the also like you like some of the platform ideas that will help us tap into the different pools to make it available in a good form. And also, honestly, again, an economically viable form, because there I'm a firm believer all the things we need to do need to be able to finance at minimum themselves so they can scale up and really make a difference.
Okay. Another question from the audience? Okay, I have one online. Charlotte asks, besides reducing food waste, what can we do to increase food and guarantee that this increased food production is distributed more fair and more evenly?
Well, so obviously, yes, producing more food is one of the solutions, but I mean, actually on a global basis, we right now have enough food to feed everybody. And even if you look at the population forecasts, like so there is challenges that may come with this, in particular when it goes to like diet choices. So like if everybody starts eating like Western Europe and the US too globally, that will cause stress on our global food systems because that it just consumes a lot more calories and energy. So like, but like, so there's definitely, so what are the levers? I mean, more food production, yes, your diet choices, and that has to do like how much meat do you eat versus like vegetarian diets, and like what's the proportion of that. But then also, like, how do you specifically increase where there's currently not enough food in those places? Because it's not just a question of like global. You also need to look at countries and regions where it's availability, and not to forget biodiversity and other new products, right? Like think about lab-grown meat. Think about like all vegetarian options that are like meat, or think about is it genetically modified? Is it biofortified? Is it other product, hydroponics, growing plants without soil? You could build a factory without any soil available and actually have food grown in there. There's a lot of, we even use it like hydroponics in our purposes in the desert, and people grow food now all of a sudden where there was no food production before. Like there are means and ways how to do that. The issue is more, how do you do that at scale, right? And if people are interested, I would recommend there's a great study. It's called State of Food Security in the World. It's like, there's also a 2-page summary if you don't want to read long. There's a lot of details in there.
We got another question from the YouTube community. People are asking, what in your opinion are the most promising concepts and practices that big multinational companies that are engaged in food production, what could these companies implement to achieve a sustainable agriculture?
That's a very good idea. It's again the search for the one silver bullet. Well, I'm not sure. I think if you look at the very large corporations, one of the core elements for them is how they collaborate and how they source. So in order to really come to a sustainable product at the end, the question is, what is the contribution and what's also the integration they can make on the actual raw material and raw products that they get, and the sustainability in the actual production of those. I think that is where one of the very big challenges lies. The next sustainability element is always the packaging front. I think those are probably the two core efforts and elements that will drive a lot of the sustainability of the future product portfolio we as consumers can also buy, and making that available. I think you made before the point of it needs to be scalable. I think thinking through and working through the economics is the one other area. It also comes back a bit to the consumer on our willingness to pay, in particular when you take food in Germany. We're just like not willing as German consumers to pay for certain quality food. So I think that's the third part, where driving efficiencies throughout the entire organization is a focus of the organization to, at the end, be able to offer a sustainable product at a price that is payable by the consumer, being paid by the consumer.
Yeah, so it is interesting where thinking about what large corporations can do. Like there's lots of aspects where I just encourage everybody to think about like what is their roles and what can they do on individual steps in actually changing it and like actually bringing it, like making it more inclusive for people. It starts maybe like where do you buy, raw materials or sort, and where do you then but process that? Do you do it in developing countries? Do you buy the raw materials and just do that then in a different country? So that's that. Looking at biodiversity, do you just promote like doing one thing over and over and over again, or do you keep like are you also promoting like good practices so that the nature stays intact? But then I think the last point I want to make is there is real business opportunities, and you can actually be creating a more inclusive and better, fairer way, and it's not detrimental. I give you an example. One of the innovations we've worked on was to actually bring shipping documents like transport from Port of Djibouti into Ethiopia, digitizing this supply chain on blockchain. And right now, this transport route is super inefficient. So right now, it takes 12 to 15 days because of intransparency in the supply chain, because actors don't talk to each other, because it's a manual paper-based process. We think we can get this down to between 3 to 5 days. So essentially, reduce transport costs by 60 or 70% through technology. Now, and this is where I think we get back to like, how can you, celebrate change, how to get into a new world. Technology actually helps us do a lot of things and make these like precision agriculture information accessible for smallholder farmers in developing countries all of a sudden. Satellites and artificial intelligence make stuff accessible that previously only like large corporates were able to actually get.
Thank you. Okay, we are kind of running out of time, but we will be able to answer one more question. Anybody questions in the audience? I can't see you very well, but I don't think so. So then I have a question at the end. So if I'm Tobias, so if I want to help combat food waste, global hunger, food loss, what is the thing I should change in my life? Just as I'm sitting here, what would you say, Tobias, you should change that?
Your own, I don't know your own behavior, of course, but if I look in the Western world, half of the food we waste is us consumers. So I think it's the helping raise awareness is always helpful in order to get the problem in people's mind, but it's your own behavior and thinking through how much you're buying, when you're buying it, how you're using it. I cite my husband, who is of course very happy that I do, is that look at the shelf life, it's over, does it need to go away? And then you always see me grabbing it and saying, that product is still okay, the yogurt hasn't come up. So you can see on products beyond the shelf life. So it's those little things, I think, they start making a difference for your own universe. And then, of course, any business you want to start founding that helps solve it. Be your guest.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point. Like, it starts with each of us as an individual. Like, there's also, we've actually created an app that's called Share the Meal. So everybody who has a smartphone can actually do it with a tap on your phone. And I just shared my meal. And it's 70 euro cents, $80. With 70 cents, you can feed a child for a day. And it's super simple. Right now, there's more than 3 million people who already use the app, and like 83 million meals that have been shared. So it's like over $40 million. So imagine this, like the 70 cents for us individually, that's very small, but if we do this together, we can actually make really a meaningful contribution. So that's a small part. But then also, if you are a startup founder, people can think about, we've been working with Silicon Valley startups, unicorns that want to expand in Africa. We've been working with companies that have sustainable business models that actually would be in developing countries. So there's lots of ways that, depending on how many side businesses you run, there may be lots of opportunities, and people who watch this, I think there's lots of things you can do. You might not think about it, but for inspiration, just go out, learn about what the problems are, and I'm sure you have ideas what could be solutions.
Thank you. So I will eat my yogurt, start a startup, and share my meal. Thank you, Karin. Thank you, Bernhard. Thank you for this interesting panel. And thank you, the audience, for listening. I hope to see you all again on the GreenTech Festival and connect with us. Thank you. And see you here on the festival. Bye.
Wow. Thank you.